The car didn't stop. It rolled past the glass-front cafe without slowing, sunlight flashing briefly across the windshield before disappearing again into traffic. Ethan Cole stood frozen on the sidewalk, coffee cooling in his hand, eyes locked on the back seat he hadn't expected to see. Inside the car, Lena was leaning into another man. Her head rested lightly against his chest. His arm was around her shoulders. One hand, steady, deliberate, was placed over the gentle curve of her stomach. Pregnant. The word hit Ethan like a delayed collision. He didn't hear the street anymore. Not the traffic. Not the voices. Not even the sound of his own breath hitching as the realization settled in. She was pregnant. And she wasn't alone. The man beside her lowered his forehead to hers, eyes closed, as if shielding her from the world. There was no rush in the gesture. No performance. Just care. Quiet, unquestionable care. The car disappeared. Ethan's fingers tightened around the paper cup until it crumpled. Hot coffee spilled over his skin, but he didn't flinch. He barely noticed. He had signed the divorce papers 3 months ago. He had told himself it was necessary, clean, strategic. He had told himself Lena would be fine. He was wrong. The pain came suddenly, sharp and humiliating. His throat tightened. His vision blurred. He dragged a hand down his face, but the tear slipped through anyway, landing on his knuckle. Not here. Not now. He turned away from the street, shoulders caving inward as if something inside him had finally broken through. He hadn't lost her when she packed her bags. He hadn't lost her when the judge stamped the papers. He lost her now. And somewhere deep down, he knew he was too late. If you're already feeling the weight of this moment, take a second and subscribe to the channel. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is there right now. Because what happens next only gets heavier. 3 months earlier, Lena Hartono had signed her name without shaking. Her lawyer had paused, watching her carefully, waiting for hesitation that never came. "That's it," the woman said softly. "You're officially divorced." Lena nodded once. Calm. Controlled. She had practiced that expression in the mirror for weeks. Across the table, Ethan looked relieved. That had hurt more than anger would have. He hadn't looked at her while she signed. He was already checking his phone, already half-turned toward the future he was convinced he needed. When she stood to leave, he finally met her eyes. "This is for the best," he said. Lena searched his face, hoping, foolishly, for doubt. For regret. For anything that suggested the last 6 years had meant more than efficiency. She found none. She smiled politely, picked up her bag, walked out. The nausea hit her in the elevator. She barely made it to the lobby bathroom before gripping the sink, breathing through waves she didn't yet have a name for. She would take the test that night. And again the next morning. And again the next day. When the doctor confirmed it, Lena didn't cry. She sat very still, hands folded over her lap, listening as if the news were meant for someone else. "How far along?" she asked. "Just over 10 weeks. 10 weeks. She did the math immediately. Ethan's child. The irony pressed against her chest, heavy and almost cruel. She didn't tell him. Not because she wanted revenge. But because she remembered his face across that table. Relieved, resolved, already gone. She remembered the way he had said, "This is for the best," like a conclusion he'd reached alone. So she chose herself. The first time Adrian Vale saw Lena, she was standing in the rain. Not crying. Not calling for help. Just standing there, suitcase at her feet, staring at a phone screen that refused to light up again. The driver slowed instinctively. Adrian glanced up from his tablet, irritation already forming, until he saw her face. "Stop," he said. The car pulled over. Adrian stepped out himself, ignoring the rain soaking into his tailored coat. He stopped a few feet away, careful not to crowd her. "Are you all right?" he asked. Lena looked up, surprised, not by the question, but by the tone. No urgency. No pity. Just concern. "My ride canceled," she said simply. Adrian nodded, as if this were a solvable problem, not a moment of vulnerability. "Where are you headed?" She hesitated, then gave the address. He opened the back door without comment. Inside the car, warmth replaced the chill instantly. Lena exhaled without realizing she'd been holding her breath. Adrian didn't sit beside her right away. He took the opposite seat, giving her space, eyes returning to the window as the city slid past. He noticed the way she rested a hand on her stomach. He said nothing. By the time they reached her destination, Lena felt something unfamiliar settle into her chest. Not hope. Relief. When she thanked him, he nodded once. "If you ever need help again," he said, handing her a card, "call." She didn't plan to. But 2 weeks later, when the landlord raised the rent unexpectedly, she did. Ethan learned about Adrian Vale the way he learned most things, by accident. A whispered name at a networking event. A pause in conversation when someone realized he was listening. A sudden shift in tone. "Vale?" Ethan asked. "The Vale." The man across from him hesitated. "You don't know." Ethan smiled thinly. "Should I?" The man lowered his voice. "He's not just an investor." That night, Ethan searched the name. Nothing obvious came up, which bothered him more than anything else. Adrian Vale existed everywhere and nowhere at once. Luxury developments, offshore holdings, quiet philanthropy. No scandals. No interviews. No personal history. The kind of man who didn't need visibility. The kind of man who didn't lose what he chose. Ethan told himself it didn't matter. Until the image at the cafe burned itself into his mind. Until the way Adrian had held Lena replayed again and again. Not possessive, not performative. Protective. The tear came again, hot and uncontrollable, slipping past Ethan's defenses as he sat alone in his apartment that night. He pressed his fist against his mouth, breathing hard, frustration clawing its way up his spine. He hadn't known. He hadn't asked. He had assumed time would wait. Outside, the city moved on without him. And somewhere across town, Lena slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, safe in the quiet certainty that she was no longer alone. The next morning, Ethan made a decision. Not a smart one, but a necessary one. He would find out who Adrian Vale really was. And what he had already lost. If you're still here, make sure you're subscribed. Stories like this don't slow down, they tighten. And before we continue, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Because from this moment on, every decision has consequences. Ethan didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed long after midnight, elbows resting on his knees, fingers interlocked so tightly his knuckles ached. The city outside his window glowed with indifferent precision, traffic lights changing on time, buildings humming with lives that weren't unraveling. His phone lay face up beside him. No messages. He had opened Lena's contact at least a dozen times. Closed it again just as often. The thought of typing her name felt invasive now, like touching something sacred after forfeiting the right. The image wouldn't leave him. Her head against another man's chest. That hand, steady, claiming nothing yet promising everything, resting over her stomach. Pregnant. Ethan pressed his thumb against his temple, eyes squeezing shut as a fresh wave of regret surged through him. He had built his life on foresight, on anticipating outcomes before they arrived. That was how he'd climbed, how he'd survived. And yet this he hadn't seen coming. Or maybe he had, and simply chose not to look. He stood abruptly and crossed the room, pacing once, twice, then stopping in front of the mirror. The man staring back at him looked older than he remembered. Lines etched deeper around his mouth. His eyes, red, tired, stripped of certainty. "This is fixable," he muttered. But the words rang hollow even as he said them. Lena woke to sunlight filtering through sheer curtains. For a brief moment, she forgot where she was. Then she felt it, the quiet weight of another presence nearby. Not intrusive, not demanding, just there. Adrian sat in the chair by the window, jacket draped neatly over the back, sleeves of his shirt rolled up. He was reading something on his tablet, glasses perched low on his nose. He looked up immediately when she stirred. "Good morning," he said. There was no surprise in his voice, as if he had been expecting her to wake at that exact second. "You didn't have to stay," Lena said softly. "I wanted to," he replied. He stood, moved toward the small kitchen area, and poured her a glass of water without asking. Set it on the table within reach. Lena watched him carefully. Not suspicious, just observant. She had learned to read men over the years, to recognize when kindness came with conditions attached. Adrian's didn't. He didn't ask questions she hadn't invited. Didn't comment on the ultrasound photo tucked carefully into her bag. Didn't try to fill the quiet with reassurances she hadn't requested. Instead, he asked what she wanted for breakfast. It was such a simple thing that it almost undid her. Ethan started digging that same morning. At first, it was casual, harmless curiosity framed as professional interest. He reached out to contacts in finance, dropped Adrian Vale's name into conversations like bait. The reactions were always the same. A pause. A glance away. A change of subject. By noon, frustration gnawed at him. He pushed harder. Called in favors. Dug into registries and shell companies, tracing lines that seemed deliberately blurred. Adrian's presence surfaced repeatedly, always at the edge of something significant. Acquisitions finalized overnight, disputes resolved without litigation, rivals withdrawing bids without explanation. Power, Ethan realized, didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it moved quietly, ensuring it never had to. That realization made his stomach turn. Because Lena wasn't just with another man. She was with someone who didn't lose. Adrian drove Lena to her next appointment himself. The car was different from the one Ethan had seen. Less conspicuous, darker, designed to disappear rather than impress. Adrian navigated traffic with ease, one hand resting loosely on the wheel, the other occasionally adjusting the temperature when he noticed Lena shift. He didn't ask if she was nervous. He noticed. At the clinic, he stayed a step behind her, matching her pace, letting her lead. When the nurse called Lena's name, Adrian stood, but didn't follow until Lena glanced back and nodded once. Inside the room, when the doctor asked if the father would like to listen, Adrian hesitated. He looked at Lena instead. She studied his face, searching, weighing, deciding. Then she nodded again. The heartbeat filled the room. Lena's breath caught. Tears blurred her vision. Adrian didn't speak. He simply reached for her hand, his grip steady, grounding. Not claiming the moment as his, but sharing it. Something in Lena's chest loosened. For the first time since the divorce, she didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was building. Ethan hit his breaking point 2 days later. The name surfaced unexpectedly during a late-night call with an old associate, someone who owed him more than he liked to admit. "You don't want to go down that road," the man said quietly. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaustion sharpening his tone. "Why?" A pause. "Because by the time you understand who Adrian Vale really is, it'll be too late to do anything about it." The line went dead shortly after. Ethan stared at his phone long after the call ended, chest tight, pulse pounding. Too late. The phrase echoed in his head, merging with the image at the cafe, the gentle way Adrian had leaned his forehead against Lena's. Ethan slammed his fist against the desk, pain shooting up his arm. He welcomed it. Needed it. He had walked away thinking love was replaceable. Now he was watching it thrive without him. Lena told Adrian about Ethan that night. Not out of lingering attachment, but because honesty felt natural with him. Necessary. "He doesn't know," she said, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "About the baby." Adrian nodded slowly. "Do you want him to?" Lena thought about the courtroom. The relief on Ethan's face. The way he hadn't asked her once how she was coping. "No," she said finally. "I want peace." Adrian studied her, eyes steady. Then he nodded. "Then that's what we protect." The word, protect, settled over her like a promise. Ethan showed up at her building the following evening. It wasn't planned. Not really. He had driven there without fully acknowledging it, hands gripping the wheel as if steering by instinct alone. He waited across the street, watching the entrance. When Lena emerged, his breath caught. She looked different, not transformed, not glowing in the exaggerated way people liked to describe pregnancy. She looked settled. Adrian stepped out behind her, placing a coat gently around her shoulders. He spoke softly, too low for Ethan to hear. Lena smiled. Ethan's vision blurred again, hot tears burning his eyes. He turned away before they could see him. This wasn't longing anymore. It was grief. From the shadows of his car, Ethan watched them leave. And for the first time since the divorce, he understood something with brutal clarity. Lena hadn't been waiting for him to change. She had been waiting to be chosen. And someone else already had. Somewhere else in the city, Adrian stood by a window overlooking the water, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes," he said calmly. "I'm aware." A pause. "No. There's no threat." Another pause. Longer this time. "She matters," Adrian said quietly. "That's enough." He ended the call, gaze drifting back to Lena, who was asleep on the couch, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. Outside, the city continued its indifferent rhythm. Inside, lines were being drawn. And Ethan Cole, whether he knew it or not, was already standing on the wrong side of them. If you're still watching, subscribe now. Stories like this don't reward people who look away halfway through. And while you're here, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm this story deserves to be seen. Now listen closely, because this is where everything starts to tilt. Ethan stopped pretending he was in control. The moment came quietly, without drama. No slammed doors. No raised voices. Just a single email that arrived at 2:14 a.m., sent from an address that didn't exist 5 minutes earlier. No subject line. Just one sentence. "You're asking questions that don't belong to you." Ethan stared at the screen, pulse thudding in his ears. He checked the headers. The routing was clean. Too clean. Whoever sent it hadn't bothered to hide. They hadn't needed to. He leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath, the kind people take when they realize they've crossed an invisible line. Adrian Vale knew. Not just that Ethan was looking into him, but how far he'd gone, who he'd spoken to, what doors he'd tried to open. And instead of pushing back, he had acknowledged him. That frightened Ethan more than a threat ever could. Lena sensed the shift before anyone told her. Adrian became quieter. Not distant, just more deliberate. His phone buzzed more often. Conversations ended abruptly when she entered the room, not because he was hiding something from her, but because he didn't want to pull her into it. She noticed the extra car outside the building some evenings. The same one. Different driver. When she asked, Adrian didn't deflect. "Things are adjusting," he said calmly. "Because of me?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "Because of people who don't know when to stop." That answer didn't comfort her. But it didn't scare her either. Not when he said it like that. Ethan's unraveling began at work. Meetings he normally dominated slipped through his fingers. Deals stalled. Partners grew cautious. A long-standing acquisition collapsed without explanation when the seller abruptly withdrew. "No hard feelings," the man said over the phone, voice stiff. "We're just reprioritizing." Ethan hung up and stared at the city skyline outside his office window. This wasn't coincidence. It was pressure. And it was precise. Someone wasn't trying to ruin him. They were reminding him how easy it would be. Lena's doctor recommended rest. "Stress isn't good for you," she said gently, eyes flicking to the chart. "Especially now." Lena nodded, one hand resting over her stomach as the other absently traced the edge of the exam table. That night, Adrian canceled everything. No meetings. No dinners. No calls beyond the bare minimum. He cooked instead. It wasn't elaborate. Just something warm. Familiar. The kind of meal that said stay without asking. They ate in silence, the kind that didn't beg to be filled. When Lena finally spoke, her voice was steady. "He saw us," she said. Adrian looked up slowly. "At the cafe?" "Yes." He waited. "I don't know how long," she continued. But long enough. Adrian considered that, then nodded once. Do you want him gone? He asked. The question wasn't emotional. It wasn't possessive. It was operational. Lena's answer surprised even herself. No, she said. I want him to understand. Adrian studied her face, searching for something. Anger, bitterness, uncertainty. He found none. Understanding comes at a cost, he said quietly. I know, Lena replied. Ethan cried alone in his car that night. Not the restrained tears from before. Not the ones he wiped away quickly, ashamed of their existence. These were raw, unfiltered, frustrated. He pressed his forehead against the steering wheel, breath shuddering as years of certainty collapsed inward. He had done everything right, played every move clean, made decisions based on logic, not sentiment. And still, this was happening. I didn't mean to hurt you, he whispered, though no one was there to hear it. The words were useless now. He had mistaken composure for strength, and love for something that could wait. The invitation arrived 2 days later. Private dinner. Limited guests. Black tie optional. The host. Vale Holdings. Ethan read it 3 times. This wasn't a warning. This was a summons. He almost declined. Almost. The room was understated elegance. Soft lighting, neutral tones, a view of the water that reminded everyone present exactly how expensive silence could be. Adrian greeted guests personally. When Ethan entered, their eyes met across the room. No tension, no surprise, just recognition. Adrian approached him calmly, extending a hand. Mr. Cole, he said, I'm glad you could make it. Ethan shook his hand. It was firm, controlled. You wanted to see me, Ethan said. Adrian smiled faintly. I thought it was time we spoke without intermediaries. They sat. Wine was poured. Food arrived untouched. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian leaned back slightly. You're very good at what you do, he said. You've built a career on anticipating outcomes. Ethan's jaw tightened. I try. But this time, Adrian continued, you anticipated the wrong one. Ethan swallowed. Lena, Adrian said, not as a challenge, but as a statement, is not a problem to be solved. I know that now, Ethan said quietly. Adrian nodded. That's why we're having this conversation. Across the room, Lena watched them. She hadn't planned to attend, but she was glad she did. She saw Ethan's shoulders slump slightly, the way his hands clenched together as if holding himself in place. She felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only clarity. This was the man she had loved, and this was the moment she finally let him go. The conversation ended without raised voices. No threats were exchanged. None were needed. Ethan left knowing 3 things with painful certainty. Adrian Vale was exactly who he appeared to be, and far more. Lena was protected in ways Ethan could never offer. And regret, once realized, did not grant second chances. That night, Ethan stood in his apartment, surrounded by success that felt suddenly irrelevant. He looked at his reflection again. And this time, he didn't argue with it. Lena slept peacefully, Adrian's hand resting lightly over hers. Outside, the city continued on, unaware, unconcerned. But the balance had shifted, and everyone involved could feel it. If you're still here, subscribe now. You don't follow a story like this halfway, you stay to the end. And if this tension is hitting you already, tap like so more people find it. Now listen carefully, because this is where control starts slipping from everyone's hands. Lena woke to the sound of Adrian's voice, low and measured, coming from the other room. She didn't move right away. The apartment was quiet otherwise. Early morning quiet, the kind that existed before the city decided what it would become that day. She lay still, one hand resting on her stomach, listening without trying to hear. Adrian never raised his voice. That, more than anything, told her something was wrong. She eventually pushed herself up and walked toward the balcony. Adrian stood with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear, gaze fixed on the water beyond the glass. Yes, he said. Pause. No, not yet. Another pause. Longer this time. Because it's unnecessary. He ended the call and turned just as Lena reached the doorway. Their eyes met. You should still be resting, he said gently. I was, she replied. Until I wasn't. Adrian crossed the room and placed his hands lightly on her shoulders. His touch was grounding, steady, familiar. Is it Ethan? She asked. Adrian didn't answer immediately. That hesitation told her more than words could. He's struggling, Adrian said finally. And people who struggle tend to make poor decisions. Lena exhaled slowly. I don't want this to turn into a war. It won't, Adrian said. Not unless someone insists. Ethan insisted. Not directly. Not recklessly. But desperation has a way of disguising itself as resolve. 2 days after the dinner, he reached out to Lena's lawyer. Not to threaten. Not to demand. To ask. He framed it carefully. Concern, closure, unresolved matters. He asked whether Lena had disclosed everything relevant during the divorce proceedings. The implication was subtle. The message landed exactly as intended. Lena read it once. Then again. Her hand trembled, not with fear, but with disbelief. He's still trying to control the narrative, she said quietly, handing the phone to Adrian. Adrian read the message. Expression unreadable. This changes things, he said. How? Lena asked. Because he's no longer seeking understanding, Adrian replied. He's seeking leverage. That afternoon, Ethan received another email. This one had a subject line. Stop. That was all it said. Ethan stared at the screen, heart racing. This wasn't a request. It was a boundary. And he had already crossed it. The pressure intensified. A long-standing client pulled out of a partnership without explanation. A regulatory inquiry surfaced, routine on the surface, but relentless in execution. Nothing illegal. Nothing overt. Just friction. Enough to slow him down. Enough to remind him that he was no longer the smartest man in the room. Ethan's nights grew shorter. His temper sharper. He replayed every moment of the marriage in his head, searching for the exact second things had slipped beyond repair. He found dozens. Too many to count. Lena felt the strain in quieter ways. Adrian was still present, still attentive, but there was a gravity beneath everything now, a sense of calculation she couldn't ignore. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Lena finally spoke the thought she'd been holding back. If this is hurting you, she said softly, you don't have to carry it for me. Adrian turned to face her fully. Listen to me, he said, voice firm but calm. You are not a burden. You are not a liability. You are a choice. The word settled deep. Choice. Not obligation. Not responsibility. Choice. Lena nodded, blinking back emotion she hadn't expected to surface. Ethan crossed another line the following week. He didn't mean to. He told himself that over and over. But when a former colleague hinted at access, suggested he might know someone who could dig deeper into Vail Holdings, Ethan didn't shut it down. He listened. And that was enough. The response was swift. Not loud. Not violent. But absolute. The investigation vanished overnight. The contact stopped answering calls. And by morning, Ethan's bank flagged a series of accounts for review. Temporary. Inconvenient. Terrifying. He drove aimlessly for hours, hands shaking on the wheel, tears blurring his vision. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about power. And he didn't have it. Adrian stood in a private office overlooking the harbor, listening as a trusted associate summarized the situation. He's unraveling, the man said. And he's dangerous in that state. Adrian nodded once. And Lena? The associate asked. Adrian's gaze hardened slightly. Is not collateral. Understood. When the man left, Adrian remained by the window, silent. For the first time in years, he felt something close to doubt. Not about his capabilities. About the cost. That night, Ethan went to Lena's building again. This time, he didn't hide across the street. He walked straight to the entrance and waited. When Lena emerged, he stepped forward. She froze. "Lena," he said, voice breaking. "Please." Adrian was there instantly, positioning himself between them without touching Ethan, without raising his voice. "This isn't appropriate," Adrian said calmly. Ethan's eyes were wet, desperate. "I just want to talk," he said. "I deserve that." Lena felt something inside her harden. "No," she said quietly. "You don't." The words landed harder than any insult. Ethan staggered back as if struck. "I loved you," he whispered. Lena met his gaze steadily. "So did I. Once." She turned away. Adrian guided her inside, the door closing softly behind them. Ethan stood alone, the weight of finality pressing down on his chest until he couldn't breathe. Inside, Lena's composure cracked. She sank onto the couch, hands shaking, tears spilling freely now. "I didn't want it to end like that," she said. Adrian knelt in front of her, taking her hands gently. "It didn't end tonight," he said. "It ended when you chose peace." Ethan didn't go home. He sat in his car until dawn, staring at nothing, replaying her words again and again. "You don't." The truth was unbearable. Because she was right. By morning, the situation reached its breaking point. Adrian made one final call. Not to threaten. Not to destroy. To conclude. Ethan would be protected from himself, financially stabilized, professionally isolated, permanently removed from Lena's orbit. Clean. Quiet. Final. It was mercy, wrapped in consequence. Lena felt the shift immediately. The tension eased. The air felt lighter. "What did you do?" she asked Adrian. "I finished it," he said simply. She studied his face, searching for something. Guilt, satisfaction, regret. She found none. Only resolve. That night, Lena stood by the window, city lights reflecting off the glass. Her life had split into two paths long ago. She had chosen the harder one. And for the first time, she knew it had been the right choice. Outside, Ethan Cole watched the city from a distance. No longer chasing, no longer fighting. Only living with what remained. If you're still here, make sure you're subscribed. Stories like this reward the people who stay. And if you felt even a second of this tension, hit like. It tells the algorithm this story matters. Now pay attention, because this is the part where regret tries one last time to change the ending. Ethan woke up on the floor of his living room. The lights were still on. His phone lay inches from his hand, screen dark, battery dead. He didn't remember lying down. Only the exhaustion that had finally dragged him under some time before dawn. His body ached in places he didn't expect. Not from injury, but from collapse. He sat up slowly, back against the couch, and laughed once under his breath. The sound was dry, hollow. This was what was left. No meetings to rush to. No calls waiting. No urgency except the one burning inside his chest, demanding something, anything to be done. He stood and walked to the window. The city looked the same. That hurt more than anything else. Lena noticed the message before she read it. The preview alone made her stomach tighten. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just one chance to do the right thing." She didn't open it immediately. She set the phone down and rested both hands over her stomach, breathing carefully until the tension eased. Adrian watched her from across the room. "You don't have to read it," he said. "I know," Lena replied. She picked up the phone anyway. Ethan's message was long. Rambling in places. Clear in others. He admitted his mistakes, without excuses this time. Acknowledged the arrogance. The assumptions. The way he had treated love like something static, something that would wait while he optimized everything else. He didn't ask for her back. That was the part that surprised her most. He asked to meet. Once. In public. No lawyers. No pressure. "I need to face what I broke," he wrote. "Even if all I leave with is the truth." Lena closed her eyes. For a long moment, she said nothing. Adrian didn't interrupt. He had learned that silence, when given freely, was more powerful than any reassurance. Finally, Lena spoke. I think I need this. Adrian nodded slowly. I'll be there, he said. She looked at him. I don't need protection. I know, he replied. I'll be nearby. That was the difference. The cafe was quiet when Ethan arrived. He chose it deliberately, neutral territory. No history attached. No memories lurking in the corners. When Lena walked in, he stood instinctively. She looked radiant in a way that had nothing to do with appearance. There was a steadiness to her now, a calm he had never managed to give her. Thank you for coming, he said. Lena nodded once and sat. They didn't speak at first. Then Ethan exhaled. I'm not here to fix anything, he said. I know I can't. Lena studied him carefully. Why are you here then? She asked. Ethan swallowed. Because I finally understand what I lost, he said. And I need to say it out loud, without asking you to carry it. His voice cracked. He didn't hide it. I treated you like an equation, he continued. Something I could solve later. I thought love was patient by default. Lena felt the words land. Not painfully, but heavily. And when you left, Ethan said, I told myself you'd be fine. Because admitting otherwise would mean admitting I failed you. Tears gathered in his eyes, spilling over despite his effort to contain them. I failed you, he said quietly. Lena didn't reach across the table. She didn't need to. I know, she replied. The honesty stunned him. Not cruel. Not angry. Just true. Outside, Adrian watched through the glass. He didn't move closer. He didn't look away. He trusted her. I'm not here for an apology, Lena continued. And I'm not here to punish you. Ethan nodded. I know. I'm here to close this, she said. For myself. He bowed his head slightly, accepting that. I don't expect to be part of your life, Ethan said. But I want you to know I never meant to hurt you. Lena rested a hand over her stomach. I believe you, she said. That doesn't change the damage. Ethan nodded again, tears sliding freely now. I see him, he said suddenly. The man you're with. Lena didn't respond. He loves you, Ethan said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Lena replied. The word was simple. Final. Ethan let out a shaky breath. Then I'm glad, he said, that it was him. And not someone who would waste you the way I did. That was the moment Lena felt it, the last thread loosen. She stood. I wish you peace, Ethan, she said. He looked up at her, eyes red, face open. I hope you find it, he replied. She turned and walked out. Ethan stayed seated long after she left. Not because he was frozen, but because for the first time, there was nothing left to chase. Adrian met Lena outside. He didn't ask what was said. He simply took her hand. How do you feel? He asked. Lighter, she said. They walked away together. That night, Ethan went home and packed away reminders of the life he had built around control and certainty. He kept nothing sentimental. Only lessons. Regret would stay. But it would no longer rule him. Lena lay awake later, Adrian's hand resting gently over hers. She felt the baby move and smiled softly. Her past had spoken. Her future was already answering. If you've made it this far, subscribe now. You don't sit through a story like this unless something inside you is already invested. Hit like and stay with me, because the ending you think you're getting isn't the one that's coming. The night Lena went into labor, the city was unusually quiet. Rain pressed gently against the windows, not heavy enough to announce itself, just enough to soften the edges of the world. Adrian noticed first, not because of panic, but because Lena's breathing changed. He looked up from the document in his hands and met her eyes. Is it time? He asked. Lena nodded once, jaw set, fingers gripping the edge of the couch. Yes. There was no rush. No shouting. No frantic scrambling. Adrian moved with deliberate calm, grabbing the bag they'd prepared weeks earlier, helping her into her coat, one hand steady at her back as if anchoring her to the present. In the car, Lena focused on her breathing while Adrian drove, eyes sharp, posture controlled. He spoke only when necessary. "I'm here," he said once. "I'm not going anywhere." Lena believed him. Across the city, Ethan woke abruptly, heart pounding for reasons he couldn't explain. He sat up in bed, disoriented, the echo of a dream clinging to him. Lena standing at a distance, calling his name without sound. He checked the time. 2:37 a.m. He told himself it was nothing. And yet, he couldn't fall back asleep. The hospital lights were harsh and unforgiving. Lena gripped Adrian's hand through the worst of it, pain cresting and breaking in waves that left her breathless. Adrian stayed close, murmuring encouragement, grounding her when the world narrowed to sensation and instinct. When the cry finally came, sharp, insistent, alive, Lena sobbed openly. Adrian felt something inside him shift permanently. The nurse placed the baby in Lena's arms, and for a moment, everything else fell away. Lena stared down at her child, tears blurring her vision, heart full in a way she had never known was possible. Adrian watched them both, chest tight, understanding with quiet certainty that this was no longer just protection. This was devotion. Ethan learned the next morning. Not from Lena. Not from Adrian. From a mutual acquaintance who didn't know the weight of what they were delivering. "She had the baby last night," the man said casually over the phone. "I thought you'd heard." Ethan didn't respond. The words echoed, hollow and final. He thanked the man, ended the call, and sat alone in his kitchen, staring at nothing. A child. His child. Born into a life he no longer belonged to. The regret didn't explode this time. It settled. Heavy. Permanent. Days passed. Lena recovered slowly, surrounded by quiet competence and unwavering presence. Adrian handled everything. Doctors, arrangements, the details that threatened to overwhelm. He never once acted like the child was something he had claimed. But every action said otherwise. Late one night, as Lena rocked the baby to sleep, she finally looked up at him. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "Any of it." Adrian knelt in front of her, eyes level, voice calm. "I know," he said. "I choose to." The baby stirred, fingers curling instinctively around Adrian's thumb. Lena watched the interaction, something in her chest tightening, not with fear, but with gratitude. Ethan tried to move on. He returned to work, accepted the limitations placed quietly around him, rebuilt what he could with what remained. But some losses were irreversible. He visited the edge of the harbor one evening, watching lights shimmer across the water, and whispered an apology to no one. It didn't change anything. Weeks later, Lena received a message. Not from Ethan. From a number she didn't recognize. "You don't know me. But you should know this. Your peace was earned. Don't doubt it." No name. No explanation. Adrian read it, expression tightening briefly before smoothing again. "Does it worry you?" Lena asked. "No," Adrian said. "It confirms something." "What?" "That closure doesn't always come from the people who hurt us." Life settled into a rhythm. Not perfect. Not easy. But real. And then, one afternoon, as Lena stood by the window watching the rain return to the city, Adrian received a call that made him still. "Yes," he said quietly. Pause. "I understand." Another pause. "Then we adjust." He ended the call and turned to Lena. "There's something you should know," he said. She looked at him, sensing the shift. "What?" she asked. Adrian hesitated, for the first time since she'd known him. "Some stories," he said carefully, "don't end just because we want them to." Lena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. "Whose story?" she asked. Adrian didn't answer immediately. Outside, the city lights flickered. Somewhere beyond them, a decision was being made. And the consequences were already in motion. If you want to know what happens next, make sure you're subscribed. Drop a comment telling me if you think the past is truly finished, or if it always finds a way back. Because this story isn't over yet.